Episode 6, Tough Times and Security. What's holding you back? Even though you're doing what you can to become competent, there's lots of evidence across all media that times are tough. Problem times or times for unlimited possibilities for competent people. If you think times are bad now, imagine life in a tent city when you were only 10 years old. That's the life Earl Nightingale experienced during the Great Depression. In the program, Success in America, Earl reported cases of competent people who were ready, willing, and able to act on their ideas.
It was during the very worst years of the Great Depression that the American film industry really got it together. And there was Wrigley's Chewing Gum, which got its start as a premium in boxes of soap. In miniature golf, in Monopoly, in radio. What a time for the entrepreneur, and it was the very time, despite the worst doldrums the nation had ever experienced from a fiscal standpoint, that saw the beginnings of thousands of companies that are today among the giants of the world. And there were many, despite the opportunities, despite the options, that failed never to appear again. All those auto companies, for example. We had a Pierce Arrow at one time, and a Rio Flying Cloud, all now in the big garage in the sky. Unfortunately, the decision to become an entrepreneur, like the decision to marry, does not at the same time confer upon the person making the decision a burst of improvement in the intelligence department. Entrepreneurial activity is not an escape from discipline. It is, in fact, the exact opposite. If you're a creative genius with little affection or aptitude for keeping books, for example, make sure you have a partner you both trust and know to be competent in the areas of your incompetence, or be able to contract for such services, the very best you can find, incidentally, and make the daily examination of the books a part of your regimen, no matter how dull or uninteresting you may find it. Ignorance is, unfortunately, no excuse for failure. You can learn to read a financial statement and assess your accounts receivable, even if your hair grows to your shoulders. America has always been a paradise. To thousands of worried, harried, struggling entrepreneurs, the word paradise will no doubt bring a wry smile or perhaps an earthy expletive commonly heard on the docks. For thousands of once hopeful companies, Chapter 11 seems like the only way out. Reorganization for the benefit of creditors, and not much benefit at that. There are no guarantees. Don't confuse opportunity with guarantee. And it's best that you get rid of that terrible word, security, now, once and for all. There's no such thing as security as long as you're alive. Dead, you're secure. Unborn, you're secure. If you're alive, you're the very epitome of insecurity. Think about it. You're on a small planet hurtling through space, the mystery of space, at about 1,000,000 miles an hour. The dinosaurs were here for millions of years and were far more successful as living creatures than we've been with our short-lived appearance as Johnny-come-latelys, and they were extinguished in a matter of weeks because of a giant meteor that raised so much dust it obliterated the sun, and they froze to death. Security? There's no such thing, but there's opportunity. There's joy. There's love. There are all kinds of wonderful things to do and see and experience, but there's no security whatever. Do you call an 80-year existence in the billions of years the universe has been around security? Okay, 85 or so. In one way, we are. We're secure in our foreknowledge of the time we've got, and we can see how well we can use that time. But the kind of security most people are looking for, that's something else. That's your home and car that the bank has as collateral for your loans. They can be resold, so you have to ask yourself, or at least it's a good idea to ask yourself, what do I want to do with my time, however short or long it may be? Do I want to make it big? Do I want to see the world and live in penthouse apartments overlooking the sea and drive fine European cars and command a 50-foot flybridge fisherman with twin diesels throbbing below my feet? Or do I want to make a difference with what I believe to be a very good idea or talent that I've worked very hard to hone to marketability. If the money comes, great. I can spend it as well as the next guy. But I'm happiest doing my thing, and I don't want a boss telling me what to do for the rest of my working life. I want to be independent as much as that's possible, considering I can only succeed to the extent that I serve others. My public, whatever that amounts to, is my boss. I must please those people, or they won't give me the money to buy the things I need and want. Elementary, my dear Watson. But if we have just that little time to live, who would want to spend it, as you say, tiptoeing through life, trying to make it safely to death? Lots of people. Short time, long time. Most people get very nervous when they think of being in charge of their own economic well-being. They want that check every week, the one with the great name at the top that makes everyone glad to cash it. And don't knock it. That's where your own key people will come from. If they were all in business for themselves, there'd be a heck of a lot more competition than there is. And keep in mind that competition only exists at all if you choose to play follow the leader. Rolls-Royce isn't in competition with anyone. Neither is Mercedes-Benz, really. Take a look at IBM and the rest of the top cats. People at the top of their lines of business. Nope, they're not concerned about competition. They're too busy creating. If you're a pace setter, you're not competing. You're leading. You're creating. You've carved your own niche out of the market, like Poke and Pole Kitchens or Baker Furniture. My company, the Nightingale Conant Corporation of Chicago, doesn't have any competitors. We have copiers and also rans. Sure, that's the sincerest form of flattery. But competitors? No. We never will have as long as we have the gung-ho creative management we've got and the team that puts it all together. You won't see us on Fortune's list of the top 500 corporations in America, but we're number one in our industry. We founded it.
The one big idea that started Nightingale Conant was the program, The Strangest Secret. Earl discovered that secret in one of the many books that he read during those years of the Depression. He found the secret in Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. And the secret he read was the 6 words, we become what we think about.
Yes, we become what we think about. Thinking is up to us, and the degree to which people regularly underestimate their capacity for accomplishment is immeasurable. We think nothing of the accomplishments of others. That is, what others do we take in stride. But when it comes to setting goals for ourselves, we tend to play things outrageously safe, and thus remain within limits embarrassingly small. Especially if there's some sort of maintenance program in effect. That is, if we have a job, though its real demands upon us are minimal, we'll usually shut down any other efforts to prepare ourselves for a much better, interesting time. 2, any sudden emergency that might develop. I remember watching a television news program in which laid-off workers of a closed Navy yard were being interviewed. The announcer asked, "What are you men going to do now that the Navy Yard is closed down?" The man nearest to him said, "Well, I guess we'll just have to wait for it to reopen again." Another man said, "I've worked in this Navy Yard for 25 years. I don't know anything else." In 25 years, a person could learn to do heart transplants in his spare time. What were all these people doing with the 16 hours a day they were not working? What about weekends and vacations? Take a pen and paper and work out the number of hours the average working person is actually on the job during a typical year. Then subtract it from the rest of his or her working time. If an hour a day were devoted to learning, to anything of a valuable nature, the ending of a job would be an incidental thing or an actual benefit. And how about think time? Any man who's responsible for providing for his family should have emergency plans A, B, and C, at least A. Just as a platoon leader in combat must ask himself, what if the enemy attacks at night? From the rear, on Sunday morning during breakfast. The family provider should ask and work out on that legal pad. What do we do if the company I work for goes out of business or lets me go for any reason? It's the kind of thinking that a man and his wife can do together, as well as separately, and as a result have several possible courses of action. And in the meantime, How about that educational program in my main field of interest? During the industrial shakeout of the early 80s, we heard this comment again and again. I worked for that company for 30 years, and now I'm out, just like that. To hear them talking, one might think they'd made a personal sacrifice for the welfare of the company they worked for. They say nothing about the fact that the company paid them for their time at the job and gave them the wherewithal to become anything they might set their hearts upon becoming. It was a fair arrangement. They were not kidnapped and pressed into servitude. They applied for their jobs and were accepted and were paid for the level of work they performed. There was no agreement to the firm to continue. Why didn't they take the possibility of a layoff into consideration and prepare for such an emergency? John and Elsie did. When John was laid off, he and Elsie sold their home in Ohio and moved to Florida, where they retired in the sunshine. If he'd been laid off years sooner, they had their little real estate refurbishing business on the side they could have turned to full-time. If they had, they would have gotten rich. The trouble with John and Elsie was that they, like so many of us, underestimated what they could do with the time he was devoting to his job at the steel mill. The job and the regular weekly paycheck was something such people just don't voluntarily give up very often. But such men had father or mother figures on whom they depended for safety as well as survival. One was the union, the other was the company. The company was so big, with such big smokestacks, and employed so many people and made so much steel or whatever. Well, it had been there forever, and it would remain, and all they had to do was show up, do whatever was necessary to keep the job, and then go home again. Why did no one talk to these people? Change. How do such people remain isolated from important information? Keep reading like that and you'll ruin your eyes, I used to hear my father say. Reading doesn't hurt the eyes, it's good for them, and especially good for what's lurking just behind them. But of course all that's gradually changing. Each year, more people move into the group that thinks.
As you move into the group that thinks and becomes more competent, the risks will seem smaller.
The idea that results in a person running the risks of starting his or her own business depends strictly upon the person's background, education, previous level of accomplishment, and aspirations. For most of us, going into business is a pursuit beset by many problems, irritations, headaches, sleepless nights, long hours, and low pay. Ah, yes, being in business for oneself does not necessarily mean an inordinately high income. On the contrary, it often means very little or no income at all for long periods of time. But once the business hits, whether it takes 5 years or 15, you've got the world by the nether parts. You decide what you're worth in the salary and bonus departments, and the company can pay for much that would ordinarily come out of an employee's pay. On becoming truly successful, it usually takes longer than we realize when we begin. Like the decision to have a child, we seldom take into consideration the length and arduous nature of the contract. But if our idea is sound, and if we are sound, and if we fully understand the concept of service and the importance of working capital and constant upgrading of our product or service, and if we have the perseverance of Columbus, we'll wake up some fine morning to find ourselves one of the competent ones of our generation. We've achieved a kind of independence never known or perhaps understood by the employee, no matter how high he or she may travel in the hushed corridors of executive country. America's top executives working for large multinational corporations usually earn more in salary and perks, stock options and bonuses than the great majority of entrepreneurs. But the entrepreneur has something else. He has control. And once the business is truly successful, which means it's probably in a state of happy expansion, he or she can hire the best executives to run things, while he or she takes a few months' rest in Hawaii, or Gstaad, or plays golf in Nairobi, and does a bit of deep-sea fishing in the Seychelles. You say it might take 15 years for that kind of success? Yes, I do. But how long would it take you if you worked for Beatrice Foods or Chrysler? 15 or 20 years, I suppose, if ever. Right. And the 15 years aren't all pain, suffering, and sleepless nights. There's a lot of joy in there, too. There's the joy of seeing your own ideas in action, and of watching your own ideas and efforts win against the competition. There's the joy of watching the money pour in along with the orders. There's a sort of kindly vindication in that. I resigned from CBS and station WBBM in Chicago in March of 1950. My friends at WBBM told me repeatedly what an idiot I was. I had reached the top. I went to work in the beautifully paneled, brass-trimmed elevators of the world-famous Wrigley Building in Chicago. I rubbed shoulders with the rich and famous, and I earned top dollar in my profession. Thousands, no millions, listened while I read the news or read the latest Jell-O commercial. Man, I was on top of the heap. I had it made, and I was only 28 years old. It does little good to remonstrate with an entrepreneur. Christopher Columbus, brilliant navigator that he was, could have spent his life in peace, navigating up and down the coastal waters of Europe and remaining within the known boundaries of the period's world maps. But at the edges of the known waters there appeared the terrifying legend, "Here there be dragons," and it was there that Columbus desired to sail, and it's there that every entrepreneur desires to sail. It's interesting to note that on the maps beyond the known world, there was never a legend reading, "Here there be unlimited opportunity for exploration. No doubt much gold and silver and precious gems and strange human creatures living beyond these boundaries, waiting for discoveries and development for the daring and intrepid sailor." Even though it had always been that way before, no one ever suggested that it might also be that way in still undiscovered areas. It's the natural proclivity of cartographers and advice givers to look upon the unknown as bad, for they, like children going into a darkened basement alone, feel that the dark and the unknown must hold strange and fearful creatures unimaginable in the known and lighted world. They cannot think otherwise. It's their nature. Yet at the time of Columbus, not a single live dragon had ever been seen upon the planet Earth by anyone. Dragons were, in fact, fairy tale creatures, yet they always inhabited the uncharted regions of the world. It said so right on the maps. So when you get an idea that you think will result in an excellent business of your own, and it needn't be a new idea by any means, keep it to yourself and your secret notepad for a period of time while you simmer it on the rotisserie of your mind's consciousness and unconsciousness. Let it turn while you view it from every angle. Look at it from the standpoint of the worst possible scenario. If it's a good, sound idea, it should survive even the worst times, as good businesses do. Incidentally, there are recession-free businesses, and many businesses that do better in recessions than in good times.
Again, that proves that times are not bad. It's just a tendency to let fear create bad thoughts about the times that we're in. Competent people always find security and become indispensable by focus.
It goes a long way toward proving the importance of specialization. Now, I don't mean a person should specialize to the point of closing his mind to everything else in the world. In fact, the best specialists are those who have a wide range of general knowledge as a platform for their specialty. But I am saying that it pays to know how to do one thing exceedingly well. In the first place, none of us can be good at everything. And the best answer to that is to become outstanding at one thing and know a little about everything. Henry Ford once said, "If money is your only hope for independence, you will never have it. The only real security that a man can have in this world is a reserve of knowledge, experience, and ability." And he was right. And a good part of this knowledge, experience, and ability should be in one field. You see, by concentrating on one line of endeavor and really learning all you can about it and getting all the experience you can in that line, you're building the kind of security that lasts a lifetime. And if you go about it the right way, you can be recognized as a real authority in a few years. You become as close to being indispensable as a person can become. And you can go sailing through economic ups and downs without too much trouble or danger. In fact, the rougher the economic waters become, the more you're needed to help the ship sail back into calm waters again. You know, a business is a lot like a ship. When it's in danger of sinking, everything goes over the side, every bit of spare gear, everything except that which is vital for its safety and the safety of the passengers. So the more vital a person, his ability and knowledge become to the successful operation of a job or business, the less chance of his being jettisoned when things get rough. Economists estimate that the next 10 to 20 years, barring thermonuclear suicide, will be the greatest the world has ever known. Our country and industry will continue to grow at a truly marvelous rate. But with a wonderful outlook like this, it's not the time for the individual to drag his feet. On the contrary, it's the ideal time for building the foundation for the kind of future he wants for himself and his family. It's the time to become outstanding at his particular specialty and grow along with a dynamic economy. But here's the paradox. It is historically true that it is during good times that just the reverse occurs. It is under the fair skies of a healthy economy that you'll find the greatest amount of complacency and the least amount of effort. We all know that the time to harvest the hay is when the sun is shining, but it's really amazing how small is the percentage that does.
In our next episode, we'll define what success is.
This is Earl Nightingale. Thank you.